I was never meant to live a life of comfort. From the very beginning, hardship had been my closest companion. My husband passed away far too early, leaving me with a daughter who had just begun to form words, and a future that looked more like a storm than a sunrise. While other women in my neighborhood relied on their husbands to bring food to the table, I carried bricks on construction sites, stitched clothes through the night, and cleaned other people's homes. Every coin I earned carried the weight of my sweat, and every meal I placed in front of my daughter felt like a victory. Her name was Zoe, and she was my only reason to keep breathing. She had my husband's eyes, soft but determined, and when she smiled at me, I felt as though God had left me a piece of heaven to hold on to. I poured my soul into raising her, telling myself again and again that if she grew up strong, educated, and successful, my struggles would be worth it. But as the years passed, I began to notice a distance between us. Perhaps it was the natural way children grow into teenagers, leaning toward friends instead of mothers. Or perhaps it was because of the harshness of my life. While other mothers were able to sit with their daughters in the evenings, telling stories and laughing over cups of tea, I was always rushing from one job to another, my hands rough with labor. I missed birthdays, school events, little celebrations that mattered to her, but I did it all believing she would someday understand. I recall the first time she mentioned going abroad. Her eyes lit up as she described universities, cities filled with lights, and opportunities she believed would never come to her if she stayed here. Her voice carried such conviction, such hunger for a better life, that I felt my heart swell. My daughter had dreams far larger than our crumbling walls, and I wanted nothing more than to see her touch the stars. But dreams require money, and money was the one thing I never had enough of. The tuition fees, the tickets, the living expenses abroad was a mountain I could not climb with just my two hands. That was when the idea of mortgaging the house came to me. It was reckless, even dangerous. The only asset I had, the only roof over our heads, would be placed in the hands of strangers. If things went wrong, we could lose everything. When I told my family, they reacted with shock, then anger. "Have you lost your senses?" my brother shouted. "A house is security. Once it's gone, you'll have nothing left. And for what? To send her away so she can forget you," an aunt whispered to another, loud enough for me to hear. "She's blinded by love. Doesn't she know daughters don't return once they fly away? Especially after tasting a better life." The words pierced me, but I stood my ground. "My daughter is different," I said firmly. "She will remember. She will come back stronger, and she will carry me with her into that better life." They laughed bitterly, some shaking their heads, others calling me foolish. Society has a cruel way of mocking women who dare to hope. In the market, I heard snide remarks. Neighbors said, "Look at her, sacrificing everything for a girl. Doesn't she know sons are the ones who return to care for their parents? Daughters belong to others once they leave." But my heart refused to listen. Every insult only made me cling harder to my belief. I had raised Zoe differently, hadn't I? I taught her resilience, the value of honesty, and the meaning of sacrifice. Surely she could see what I was doing for her. Surely she would carry my love in her bones, just as I carried her father's memory in mine. The day I signed the mortgage papers, my hands trembled. The pen felt heavier than any brick I had ever carried, because I knew with one stroke I was gambling with everything I had built. My house, my safe corner of the world, was no longer mine. Yet as I looked at Zoe's hopeful eyes, I told myself it was worth it. "You'll make me proud one day," I whispered to her that night. Her reply was quiet, almost distant. "I'll try, Mama." It wasn't the overflowing gratitude I had imagined, but I dismissed it, telling myself that children often struggle to express their feelings. I filled in the silence with my own hope, convincing myself that one day she would repay me not in money, but in love. Still, The doubts lingered in the shadows. Sometimes I'd wake up in the middle of the night, staring at the cracks in the ceiling, wondering if I had made the biggest mistake of my life. But then I'd hear her in her room, books scattered across her bed, muttering notes under her breath. And in those moments, I would believe again. I faced ridicule from every direction, yet I carried my decision like armor. When neighbors scoffed, I looked away. When relatives refused to help, I smiled through the rejection. Because at the end of the day, my daughter's dreams mattered more than my pride, more than my comfort, more than the walls of this fragile house. I told myself 100 times, my daughter is not like the others. She will never abandon me. She will be my blessing, my reward for every tear I've shed. Little did I know, life was preparing to test that blind faith in the cruelest way possible. The months leading up to Zoe's departure were filled with a strange mix of pride and unease. I had expected her to cling to me, to thank me endlessly for the sacrifices I was making. Instead, she seemed busier than ever, more calls with her friends, more time locked away in her room, less time sitting beside me in the evenings. I told myself it was normal. She was preparing for a new life, a bigger world. But deep down, there was a gnawing ache inside me, a whisper asking, why does she feel so far away already? One evening, I returned home late from work, my back screaming with pain, only to find Zoe sitting at the table scrolling through her phone. I set down the bag of groceries and smiled. Come help me, dear. We'll cook together tonight. She barely looked up. I already ate with my friends. Mama, you can make something for yourself. Her tone was casual, almost dismissive. For a moment, I just stood there, frozen. I had always imagined these last months before her departure would be filled with warmth, with us creating memories to hold on to. Instead, it felt like I was already forgotten. But I brushed it off. Children are like that, I told myself. She's excited, distracted. Once she settled abroad, she realized what I did for her. Still, the little slights began to add up. She started speaking more in English around me, as though embarrassed by my broken words when I tried to keep up. She refused to wear the simple clothes I stitched for her, insisting on buying new ones, even when I told her money was tight. And when relatives came over, she avoided sitting with me, preferring to show off her acceptance letters and plans to anyone who would listen. I felt like a shadow in my own house. The hardest part was the way she spoke about our future. Whenever I asked, will you call me when you reach? She would shrug. Mama, I'll be busy. Don't expect me to talk every day. Or when I dreamed aloud, one day, you'll come back and build us a new home. She would laugh lightly and say, we'll see. Her words cut deeper than she realized, but I never scolded her. Instead, I comforted myself with the thought that children don't understand sacrifice until they grow older. One day she would see me clearly, but the outside world didn't let me forget their warnings. In the market, neighbors smirked when they saw me. Your daughter must be flying soon, one woman said. Don't worry, you'll get a postcard once a year if you're lucky. Another added with a chuckle. You gave away your house for her. I hope she remembers to send you some money, or else you'll be begging at our doors. I smiled tightly, never responding, but inside, their words lodged like thorns. At night, I would stare at Zoe's sleeping face and whisper to myself, my daughter is different. My daughter is not like the others, yet. Their voices echoed in my mind. The first real crack came one morning when I overheard her talking on the phone. I was folding laundry in the next room, the door slightly ajar. Her voice was hushed, impatient. Don't worry, I won't let her bother me when I'm abroad. Yes, I know she expects too much. No, I'll handle it. She can't follow me there. I froze, the clothes slipping from my hands. She was talking about me, about how I was a burden she was eager to leave behind. My heart hammered in my chest, and for a moment I couldn't breathe. When I walked into her room, she quickly ended the call and forced a smile. Mama, you're home early. I wanted to ask her what she meant. I wanted to demand answers. But when I looked into her eyes, I couldn't bring myself to speak. Fear clamped my throat shut. Instead, I smiled weakly and left the room, pretending I had heard nothing. That night, I cried into my pillow, silently so she wouldn't hear. My greatest fear was beginning to take shape, that all the voices mocking me, all the relatives who called me foolish, might have been right. But even then, my love fought against my doubts. I told myself she was stressed, nervous about leaving. People say hurtful things when they're under pressure. Surely, once she realized how much I had sacrificed, she would change. I clung to that hope with all the strength I had left. The day of her visa approval arrived, and she burst into the house waving the papers. "It's done, Mama. I'm leaving next month." Her excitement was contagious. For a brief moment, all my doubts melted away. I hugged her tightly, tears streaming down my face. "I'm so proud of you," I whispered. She hugged me back, but only for a moment before pulling away to call her friends. She spent the rest of the evening celebrating with them while I cooked her favorite meal, which went cold on the table. Still, I told myself, she has to remember. But in the days that followed, the distance grew. She started avoiding conversations about home, brushing off my worries about the mortgage, and making vague promises about sending money once she was settled. It was as if she were already living in another world, one where I didn't exist. And yet, I loved her all the more. Every morning, I prayed for her success. Every night, I whispered her name like a prayer. Because no matter how much she hurt me, she was still my daughter. My reason? I didn't know it then, but the storm had only just begun. The real betrayal, the one that would shatter me beyond recognition, was waiting at the airport. As the day of Zoe's departure drew closer, I found myself torn between two realities. The one I wanted to believe in, and the one my eyes kept forcing me to see. I wanted to believe she was still my little girl. The same child who once clutched my sorry and begged me never to leave her side. But the girl who now packed her suitcases spoke endlessly of her future and rolled her eyes when I reminded her of our struggles. She felt like a stranger, wearing my daughter's. Neighbors never let me forget the risk I had taken. Every time I walked through the market, whispers followed me. "There goes the foolish widow," someone would murmur. "She sold her home for a daughter who'll never look back." Another voice once pierced the crowd. "You'll see. At the airport, she won't even hug you. Girls forget their mothers faster than you can blink." I kept my head down, clutching my grocery bag, but their words burned me alive. At night, I would sit in the darkened courtyard, listening to the silence of our house, and question myself. Had I gambled too much on love? But then I would hear Zoe humming softly in her room, or see her reading late into the night, and my faith would return. "She is different," I reminded myself. "She will not betray me." Still, the cracks widened. A week before her flight, I sat with her to go over the final expenses. The mortgage payments loomed over me like a storm cloud, but I tried to keep my tone light. "Remember, dear, once you are settled, even a little support will help us manage the installments. I don't need much, just enough to keep the house safe." She sighed, scrolling through her phone. "Mama, please don't start this again. I'm going abroad to study, not to become your provider. Don't put this pressure on me." Her words cut like glass. I stared at her, speechless, wondering if she had forgotten everything, the endless nights I worked, the meals I skipped, the home I sacrificed. I wanted to remind her, to shake her into remembering. But my throat closed up, and all I managed was a whisper. "I only asked because everything I did was for you." She didn't look up. "And I didn't ask you to mortgage the house. You chose that yourself." Those words echoed in my chest long after she left the room. "You chose that yourself." It was true, wasn't it? I had made the decision alone, believing she would carry me in her heart. Perhaps she never wanted that burden. The days blurred into a mix of preparations and goodbyes. Relatives came by, some genuinely happy, others wearing smiles too thin to hide their judgment. "Congratulations," one cousin said, her tone laced with venom. "May your daughter remember you when she's living in luxury?" I forced a smile. Of course she will. She's my daughter. But inside, doubt twisted tighter around my ribs. The night before the flight, I couldn't sleep. I wandered the halls of our small house, touching the walls, the worn-out furniture, the old photo of my husband smiling proudly from the shelf. I whispered to him, "I've done everything for her, just like we dreamed. She will make us proud. She has to." When I peeked into Zoe's room, she was on a video call with her friends, laughing about the adventures waiting for her abroad. Her laughter was loud, unguarded, and it hurt to realize that I hadn't heard that kind of joy directed toward me in years. I closed the door quietly, not wanting to interrupt. The morning of the flight arrived. I woke early, cooked her favorite parathas, and waited for her at the table. She came out in a rush, pulling her suitcase behind her, and barely touched the food. "I'm not hungry, Mama. Let's go. We'll be late." Swallowed my disappointment and followed her to the taxi. The ride to the airport felt endless. I tried to talk, to remind her of the little things, how I would write her letters, how she should eat properly, how she must call me the moment she landed. She nodded absently, her eyes glued to her phone. Each mile we covered, I felt her slipping further away. At the airport, the chaos of travelers, announcements, and luggage trolleys surrounded us. I clutched her hand tightly, but she pulled away gently, embarrassed, as if my presence was a burden she had to tolerate. My heart sank as we stood in the departure hall. I looked at her, my daughter, my world, and whispered, "Promise me you won't forget me." She glanced at me, her expression unreadable, and then turned away to check her document. No promise, no reassurance, only silence. For a moment, I felt the world tilt beneath my feet. The doubts that had haunted me for months screamed louder than ever. "She's leaving you behind. You gave her everything, and she's already erased you from her future." But still, like a fool, I clung to hope. I told myself she was nervous, distracted, overwhelmed by the journey ahead. At the last moment, surely, she would turn back, hug me, and remind me why I had sacrificed everything. I held on to that belief with every fiber of my being, not knowing that within minutes, my heart would be shattered in a way that would haunt me forever. The betrayal was waiting just beyond the gate asterisk the night before her departure. I couldn't sleep. My heart was a mixture of pride and dread, like two storms clashing in my chest. I walked from one room to another, touching the walls of the house I had mortgaged, whispering silent prayers. Every brick, every corner carried my sacrifices. I had stitched extra clothes, sold jewelry, and even borrowed quietly from neighbors just to make sure my daughter had enough when she left. She was my only child. My only reason to keep breathing after life had stolen so much. I told myself, tomorrow, she will fly away. Tomorrow, she will remember everything I did at dawn. I dressed carefully in my best sour kameez, the one I wore only on Eid. I wanted her to remember me not as a tired, worn-out woman, but as a mother standing tall. I packed parathas and her favorite acar in a small box for the journey, even though she had laughed at me the night before. "Mom, nobody eats parathas on international flights. Please don't embarrass me." Her words stung, but I stayed quiet. I told myself she was just nervous, that young people speak harshly when they are afraid. When we reached the airport, my hands trembled, holding her documents, tickets, and passport. She walked ahead, sleek suitcase rolling smoothly behind her, while I carried the heavier bag, her bag. My chest swelled with a strange mixture of exhaustion and pride. The terminal was filled with goodbyes. Fathers hugged sons, mothers kissed daughters, and families cried together. I wanted the same, but she stood apart from me, scrolling on her phone, pretending I wasn't there. Still, I walked closer. "Dear, let me fix your dupatta. It's sliding. She jerked back. Mom, please, don't make a scene. I told you not to come dressed like this. People are watching. Her words cut sharper than knives. My throat tightened, but I swallowed the pain. I thought, she's nervous. Let her be. Once she boards, she hugged me. The final boarding announcement echoed, and my heart raced. I stepped forward, arms open, ready to hold her one last time. But before I could, she raised her hand not to hug me, but to stop me. Please don't follow me inside, she said coldly. From now on, don't introduce yourself as my mother. You've done enough. I'll handle my life on my own. For a moment, the world spun. The walls of the terminal seemed to close in. I stared at her face, the same face I had rocked to sleep as a baby, the same lips that once called me mom with love. Now those lips denied me. I felt the stares of strangers piercing me. Some whispered, some smirked. My knees weakened, and I clutched the railing to keep standing. My daughter turned, without a tear, without a backward glance, and walked away into a new life. A life where I didn't exist. And just like that, in the middle of the airport crowd, I was abandoned. For a few seconds, I couldn't breathe. The air in the airport felt heavy, poisonous, pressing down on my chest. My daughter's words echoed in my head like cruel bells. Don't introduce yourself as my mother. I stood frozen, clutching the railing with trembling hands. The crowd around me blurred, faces melting into an ocean of pity, mockery, and indifference. Some people avoided looking at me, while others whispered with raised eyebrows. A group of young girls laughed softly, one of them nudging her friend as if to say, look, even her own daughter doesn't want her. I wanted to disappear. My feet wobbled, my head spun. I had mortgaged my house, sold every piece of gold that once symbolized my marriage, endured nights of hunger, humiliation from neighbors, and endless double shifts just so she could stand here, passport in hand. And now, in front of the world, she denied me. Filled with tears, but I refused to let them fall. If I collapsed, crying, the world would feast on my pain. I wanted to stay strong, but my body betrayed me. My knees buckled, and I sank onto the cold floor, clutching my chest as though I could hold my shattered heart together. Voices buzzed around me. Poor woman. Shameful daughter. How could she say that? Well, maybe she smothered the girl. Who knows? Still, a mother is a mother. Every word stabbed deeper. I wanted to scream. You don't know me. You don't know what I gave up. But my throat locked shut. I stared at the gate where my daughter had disappeared. I remembered her first steps, how she once clung to my dupatta, crying, "Mom, don't leave me." The irony made my chest ache. Now she had left me, and in the cruelest way possible. The paratha box slipped from my hands, spilling onto the floor. Grease stained the tiles, and the acre leaked from the corner. I bent forward, trying to pick it up, but my hands shook too much. That was when I heard footsteps, firm, confident, not hurried like the others. A man's voice broke through the haze. "Leave it. Let me help you." I looked up through blurred vision. A stranger, tall, mid-40s, maybe, dressed in a neat business suit, knelt beside me. His eyes were steady, kind, without the mockery I had seen in others. He picked up the paratha box, carefully wiped it with a tissue from his pocket, and placed it back in my lap. "Are you all right, madam?" he asked softly. My lips quivered, but no words came out. Only tears spilled silently down my cheeks. He looked around at the people staring and then raised his voice, strong and clear. "Why are you all standing here watching? Do you not see a hero sitting in front of you?" The crowd shifted, murmuring. My head snapped up at his words. "Hero. Me," he continued, his voice firm, commanding attention. "This woman is not to be pitied. She is to be honored. Do you know what it means to mortgage your house? To sell your last possessions just so your child can dream bigger? You gossip, you whisper, But none of you would survive half her sacrifices. Look at her. This is not a weakness. This is a strength the world cannot measure. The whispers stopped. Silence spread across the terminal. For the first time in what felt like hours, I could breathe. His words wrapped around me like a shield. He turned to me again, lowering his voice. Madam, don't cry for someone who doesn't recognize your worth. You have already proven yourself. One ungrateful child cannot erase a lifetime of sacrifice. I sobbed quietly, my hands covering my face. His words pierced deeper than my daughter's rejection. But this time, they healed instead of hurting. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a small water bottle. Here, drink this. Steady yourself. I took it with trembling hands, sipped, and felt my throat loosen slightly. Why? Why are you helping me? I whispered. He smiled gently. Because I was once like your daughter. Blind, selfish. I left my own mother behind, chasing dreams. She died before I could say sorry. I see her in you. I won't let another mother sit alone, humiliated, while the world stares. Tears poured down my cheeks again, but these were different. They carried grief, yes, but also gratitude. The man stood up, turned to the bystanders, and said louder, "If you ever see a mother like this, don't stand and laugh. Stand and salute. Because without mothers like her, none of us would be here." People lowered their heads, ashamed. A few even muttered prayers. I saw one woman in the crowd wiping her own tears. The stranger bent down again, gently offering his hand. Come, let me walk you out. You don't deserve this place filled with cold stares. You deserve respect. For the first time that day, I allowed myself to lean on someone. My fingers, frail and shaking, held onto his hand. He pulled me up slowly, steadying me like a father would steady a child. As we walked out of the terminal, the air outside felt lighter. My chest still ached, but I wasn't collapsing anymore. Beside me walked a stranger, but in that moment, he was more of a son than the child I had raised with blood and bone, and though I had lost something irreparable, I had also gained something unexpected. Someone reminding me I was not a failure. Not a fool, not a forgotten mother. I was a hero. The sliding doors of the airport opened, and warm air brushed against my face. I blinked at the sudden light as if I had stepped out of one world and into another. Inside, I had been humiliated, stripped of dignity. Outside, it was quiet, almost forgiving. The stranger walked beside me, carrying the Parata box I had dropped. It was such a small gesture, yet to me, it felt like he was moving the pieces of my shattered heart. For a long while, neither of us spoke. My steps were slow, heavy, as though my body resisted leaving that place, as if some part of me still stood at the boarding gate, staring at the daughter who had turned her back. Finally, I whispered, "I don't even know your name." He looked at me, a gentle smile tugging at his lip. "Faisal," he said simply. "And yours?" "Shahida," I answered, my voice barely audible. Saying my name felt strange, as though I was introducing someone else. The Shahida, who had mortgaged her house, endured insults, starved herself for her daughter. She seemed like another woman entirely. Faisal nodded thoughtfully. "Shahida, witness. That's what your name means, doesn't it? To bear witness. And today, you bore witness to both cruelty and resilience." His words stung, yet they also soothed. Resilience? Was that what this was? It didn't feel like strength. It felt like being torn apart from the inside. We found a bench outside the terminal. My body begged for rest, so I sank onto it, clutching my dupatta around me. Faisal sat beside me, but not too close, respectful, as if giving me space to breathe. After a silence, he spoke again. "You know, your daughter may think she's free of you now, but one day she'll remember. When the world turns cold, she craved the warmth she once rejected. And by then?" He stopped, sighing. "By then, it may be too late." A lump rose in my throat. She was all I had, I admitted. All my life, people said I was a fool to invest everything in her. I used to smile and say, "No, my daughter is different." Today, my voice cracked. Today they proved me wrong. Faisal turned to me, his eyes steady. "No, Shahida, you were not wrong. Your love was not wrong. What she did says nothing about you. It only speaks about her. You see, sacrifices don't lose their worth just because the one receiving them fails to honor them. Sacrifice is sacred. And you, Shahida, are sacred for making it." Tears welled up again. I covered my face with my palms, and for the first time since that airport humiliation, I cried openly, not holding back, not caring who saw. My sobs shook my body, and Faisal sat quietly, letting me grieve. When the storm inside me softened, I lowered my hands. My face burned, but strangely, I felt lighter. He handed me a tissue without a word. "Do you have somewhere to go?" he asked gently. I shook my head. "I mortgaged my house for her. Now, I don't even know if I'll get it back. My relatives turned away long ago. They called me stubborn, obsessed. Maybe they were right. Or maybe," Faisal said firmly, "they were cowards. It takes courage to risk everything for someone else's future. Most people only think of themselves. You didn't. That doesn't make you obsessed. It makes you extraordinary." His words pressed against the wound in my heart, like balm on raw skin. For years, I had lived with people's mockery. Why waste money on a girl? She'll forget you. And today, when she had in fact forgotten me, I thought they had one. But Faisal's voice reminded me that my love wasn't measured by her gratitude. It was measured by the purity with which I gave it. We sat there for hours. He spoke little, but when he did, his words carried weight. I learned he was a businessman who had once lived abroad, who had abandoned his own mother in the name of ambition. "I thought success would fill the void," he admitted, his eyes clouded. But it didn't. When I got the news of her death, I realized I had lost everything real. Listening to him, I saw a mirror of what could one day become my daughter's fate. Perhaps one day she too would wake up and realize what she had thrown away. But whether that day came or not, my role was done. I had given her everything. Now it was time to reclaim myself. As evening shadows stretched across the airport walls, Faisal stood. "Come," he said softly. "Let me drop you home." Home. The word felt empty, but I rose anyway, gathering my dupatta tightly. My legs were weak, but with each step, I felt a faint stirring, as if somewhere deep inside, a seed of strength was trying to grow again. That night, when I unlocked the door of my rented room, the silence was crushing. But as I placed the paratha box on the table, I remembered Faisal's words. "You are not weak. You are sacred." For the first time since the betrayal, I whispered to myself, I am still a mother. And I am still me. And maybe, just maybe, that was enough to begin again. The days after the airport passed in a blur. I moved through my tiny rented room like a ghost, the humiliation replaying in my mind with every blink. I would close my eyes and see my daughter's face, blank and unrecognizing, her voice sharp as she pushed me away. Each time, my chest tightened and I wondered if I would ever breathe freely again. But slowly, something shifted. At night, when I lay on my thin mattress, Faisal's words returned to me. Sacrifice doesn't lose its worth. I repeated them like a prayer, as though clinging to those syllables could anchor me. One morning, I woke before dawn and sat by the window. The city stirred, vendors calling, rickshaws rumbling. For years, this sound had been background noise, but now it reminded me. Life goes on, with or without recognition. My story did not end at that airport. I was still alive. And as long as I lived, I could still shape something from the ruins. I decided to work again. Not for survival alone, but to reclaim the dignity I thought I had lost. I went back to the school where I had once taught part-time. At first, they looked at me with pity. They had heard whispers of what had happened. But when I walked into that classroom, Chalk in hand, something inside me stirred. Those children's eyes, bright with curiosity, reflected the one thing my daughter had lost: innocence. And in their laughter, I found pieces of myself I thought had died. Teaching became my lifeline. Each lesson reminded me that I could still give, but this time without expectation. When a little girl raised her hand shyly and said, "Miss, you're my favorite," my throat tightened. Here, my sacrifices were not wasted. Here, they blossomed. Faisal never appeared again, as if he truly had been an angel passing through, but his words echoed in the walls of my heart. Sometimes, when I felt the familiar ache of loss, I imagined him standing beside me, saying, "You are extraordinary." And I would straighten my shoulders just a little. Months passed. I saved every rupee, determined to buy back my mortgaged house. It was slow, painful work, but I no longer dreaded the struggle. I embraced it. My house was not just bricks and walls. It was proof that I could rise again then. One evening, as I walked home with weary feet and an empty lunchbox, I saw something at my door. A bouquet, left anonymously. Tucked inside was a note for the mother who taught me what sacrifice means. Don't stop believing in yourself. I never knew who left it. Perhaps a student's parent. Perhaps Faisal. Perhaps a stranger who had overheard my story. It didn't matter. What mattered was that someone, somewhere, saw me. Not as a humiliated woman, not as a mother betrayed, but as a hero for the first time in a long while. I smiled without bitterness. And then, 1 year later, I stood before the house I had once mortgaged, keys trembling in my hands. I had reclaimed it brick by brick, rupee by rupee, sacrifice upon sacrifice. I stepped inside, breathing in the dust, and whispered, "Welcome home." I thought of my daughter. A part of me still longed for her, still hoped she would walk through that door one day with tears in her eyes. But another part of me, the stronger part, accepted the truth. Even if she never returned, I would survive. I had given her wings, and she had flown. But I had also given myself roots, and those roots would hold me steady. Sometimes, when neighbors passed by, they would nod respectfully. "She lost everything once," I overheard one of them say, "but she built it all back." And in that moment, I realized I was no longer just a mother waiting for her child's love. I was a woman who had weathered betrayal, endured humiliation, and risen again. The stranger at the airport had called me a hero. At the time, I didn't believe him. But now, as I stood in my home again, I whispered the word to myself, hero, and for the first time I believed it. When I look back now, I sometimes wonder how one moment can shatter a lifetime of sacrifice. One decision, one betrayal, one cold glance at an airport gate, it felt like the ground had opened beneath me. For days, I thought my story had ended there, in humiliation. But as the months turned into years, I began to understand something deeper. Life doesn't end at betrayal. It doesn't end at humiliation. It doesn't even end when the people you gave everything to abandon you. Life goes on, and the only question is, will you keep standing, or will you let yourself fall forever? I chose to stand, not because I was strong. No, in those first days, I was anything but strong. I was broken, weeping, barely breathing. But sometimes, standing is simply refusing to let pain be the final word. Every morning I got up, every class I taught, every rupee I saved, that was my way of saying, I am still here. And with time, I discovered something I never expected. The very pain that nearly destroyed me became the soil in which new strength grew. Betrayal cut me open. But through those wounds, I learned compassion for others. I learned to value myself beyond what anyone else thought of me. And I learned that love is not wasted, even when it is unreturned. You see, love doesn't lose its worth because someone rejects it. My love for my daughter remains part of who I am. It is carved into my bones, into the lines on my hands, into the gray in my hair. Whether or not she ever acknowledges it, that love was real. And real love can never be erased. But here's the lesson I want to leave with you. Love is sacred. Yes, but so are you. Do not let anyone, not even your own flesh and blood, convince you that you are worthless. Do not measure your value by how others treat you. If you gave, if you sacrificed, if you poured your heart into someone, that was your greatness. Their failure to honor it belongs to them, not to you. For the longest time, I believed my story was a tragedy. A mother who gave everything, only to be cast aside. But now I see it differently. My story is not just about loss. It is about rebirth. I lost a daughter, but I found myself. I lost the illusion of gratitude, but I found the truth of resilience. I lost my house, but I gained the strength to rebuild it with my own 2 hands. And I want you, yes, you watching this, to think about your own life. Have you ever been betrayed? By a friend, a partner, maybe even by your own family? Did you ever give so much, only to be left empty-handed? If you have, then you know the kind of wound I carry. And you also know the temptation to give up, to let bitterness swallow you whole. But I ask you this, what if the betrayal wasn't the end of your story? What if it was the beginning of something greater? What if, in losing what you thought you needed most, you discovered the strength you didn't know you had? Would you allow yourself to believe that you could rise again? That stranger at the airport called me a hero. At the time, I thought he was wrong. But today, I see what he meant. A hero is not someone who never falls. A hero is someone who rises after the fall, someone who refuses to stay buried in the dust of betrayal. And I want to tell you, you can be that hero in your own life, not because of what others say about you, not because of recognition, but because you refuse to give up on yourself. So, here is my question to you. If you were in my place, standing at that airport, hearing your own child deny you, what would you do? Would you crumble and never rise again? Or would you let the pain forge you into someone stronger? Comment below and tell me, what would you do if the person you sacrificed everything for turned their back on you? I want to hear your voice, because stories like mine are not rare. Too many parents, spouses, and friends have tasted betrayal in its cruelest form. By sharing, we can remind each other that none of us is alone. And if my story touched you, if you carried even a little of my pain while listening, then I ask you to stay connected. Subscribe, not just to hear more stories like mine, but to be part of a community that believes pain can be transformed into power, that betrayal can be rewritten into resilience, and that no matter how broken we feel, we are never beyond repair, because sometimes all it takes is one voice, a stranger's voice at an airport, or perhaps even my voice speaking to you now to remind you that you are stronger than you think. So carry this with you. You are not weak because you loved. You are not foolish because you gave. You are not worthless because someone failed to see your worth. You are human. And in your humanity lies a power greater than betrayal, greater than humiliation, greater than loss. That power is the ability to rise. And when you rise, when you stand again after being broken, you become the hero of your own story. So tell me, will you rise?